thankfully. Okay, item 12, Resource Legislation Amendment Bill. Mr. Palmer, do you need Mr. Ide up here, or are you good? Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. The Resource Legislation Bill is the long-awaited bill from the Government to amend primarily the Resource Management Act, but it is an incredibly complex piece of legislation at 180 pages, and it does amend a range of other pieces of legislation that relate to resource management. We don't have time today to go through all of the issues raised by that bill. The Select Committee, Local Government Environment Select Committee, has called for submissions by the 14th of March. It's fair to say they will be inundated with many hundreds, possibly thousands of submissions, and will be in an elongated process of consideration of those. What we've provided to the committee is a summary of our initial thinking, and we are continuing to liaise with Local Government New Zealand, other councils around the country on issues that the legislation gives rise to. And our proposal today is to invite members of the committee to directly engage with staff on any matters that you believe needs to be raised in the submission. And our starting point is in attachment 1, but I do want to stress that it is a work in progress and it is preliminary. Can I perhaps just say that overall, in relation to the work of the Regional Planning Committee, the amendment bill does propose some significant strengthening of the required engagement, and in this case, iwi is the term used most consistently, and there is particular emphasis on iwi authorities. But generally, engagement with tangata whenua under the Resource Management Act would be strengthened by these proposals. Having said that, an overarching emphasis of the bill is shifting to strengthen the role of central government in what is called the National Planning Template, so to more tightly constrain and define that which needs to be in our plan. At the more benign end, that means simplifying and standardising what councils do around the country. At its more active end, it could mean central government using a mechanism to provide national direction that doesn't go through the current National Policy Statement, National Environmental Standard process, so effectively by order in council. So the Minister for the Environment being able to more quickly direct councils in various matters, and there are a range of intervention powers. I think it's fair to say that overall this package sees a shift in the balance of power, if you like, from local government back towards the centre, which is consistent with the current government's stated desire to drive more national direction, get more consistency, and get things happening in a more timely fashion. The bill was supported at first reading by the Labour Party as well as Māori Party, and I think New Zealand First even possibly. So at this point it is enjoying relatively broad parliamentary support, and we can expect it to be enacted in the fullness of time. And Gavin is available to take any specific questions on the mechanisms or the detail of the bill if you wish.
Mr. Walker.
I note on page, I can't wait to it. Anyway, the bits in yellow. 89. I've been in denial for too long. That's spectacles, but
page 89.
yeah, but the bits in yellow. The staff have worked with Hawke's Bay Regional Council Planning Committee, and the submission has been approved by council's elected members. I acknowledge that there has been emails in terms of requests for responses. I acknowledge that, but I'm just I think this statement might be a bit overcooked, because in the meeting prior to this one, very few of the Māori members could recall being engaged in this matter. So that's all. It's not a biggie, but I just yeah.
If I can jump in and just perhaps clarify, maybe allay some concerns. One of the reasons why it's in yellow is that it's, as James said, it's work in progress.
Yeah.
It's written as if this is potentially a covering letter to be lodged in March.
And one of the members who left asked me to raise this issue, so I have done so.
But if you look at the date on it, Toro, it's what will be sent on 13th of March, so it's in anticipation of full and robust interaction. There you go. Yeah, good on you. Okay, Councillor Barker.
Having been a recipient of a number of these things, let's ask the question, is it really worth our while and the use of our staff time to put in a submission unless we have something specific that gets to us and we want to say something for ourselves? I just see this, if we're going to put in a submission which is going to agree with local government, New Zealand local government, this, all the rest of it, and just be part of the noise, why don't we just can it away and leave it for them? Because writing submission will take staff probably 2 or 3 days. And I just ask myself, would it be better for the staff to spend 2 or 3 days doing something productive and useful other than write something which is going to be white noise in the select committee process? I just want to question the value of it. If it's for something specific for us that we've got a real bugbear about, fair enough.
I was going to probably answer that on the basis that we actually don't know yet what the committee might come up with. If there was nothing, I tend to agree with your sentiment, actually. But if there are no pressing issues that are outside of an LGNZ type approach, a one-liner saying we support LGNZ submission would just about do it. But, no.
Mr. Chairman, there are some serious issues though, and they revolve around the centralisation of power and the potential ability for central government to dictate to local government, which is not what things are about. And that sort of stuff's got to be fought as hard as you can. And you're not going to get any traction if you remain silent.
Councillor.
So I would have another candidate in that category. That there is a set of comments in here on page 94 which deal with the collaborative planning process, and this is an area where, given all the rest of the discussion we have had today, exactly what first of all, it's not clear what is being proposed, but it looks like we're taking a fairly cautionary view of this, and we're taking a position. I'm not sure whether this is the local government position we're just reciting here, whether this is a considered regional council position, that we're not entirely happy with what's called a cut and paste approach here to collaborative planning, and that we would want to say something about our freedom of movement in that space. And there's a specific comment here about no provision for withdrawing from the process if the group itself cannot continue. My understanding is where this is headed is to basically say you either come to the table or you don't. If you don't come to the table, you have no further rights in the process. That's something that I can't see us supporting without a lot of strenuous debate around the table, perhaps, here.
So this may be a case of poor drafting. Slightly hesitate to say it about my former colleagues, just in so much as the Act just doesn't deal with a scenario whereby you've initiated a process, it's agreed that it's going to have statutory weight, and then the wheels start coming off part way through, and you can't effectively back out. So the mechanisms are undercooked in terms of the legislation. So you're quite right that that is a serious deficiency, and it would need remedying, I think, for us to have comfort to be able to use that tool going forward. And I think there are a bunch of issues around the collaborative planning tool that we'd need to see better fleshed out, and I'm sure there'll be many submitters making a similar comment.
As a former Wellington person, is it your understanding that the intent eventually is going to, as it will be proposed formally, will be to let a regional council opt in or out of of a full menu of collaborative approaches, or is there going to be a take one or take it or leave it type of proposition?
There's likely to be some parameters around sort of what is a bare minimum collaborative process, and then some freedom to design within that. But that is all still work which is ongoing here.
Councillor Bevan, then.
Have we actually seen the local government submission?
A draft version of that was sent Friday evening, I think it was, Friday afternoon, to several staff, and so it's almost as long as the bill itself. It's quite lengthy in its comments. I've got to say, it's at first glance, it's pretty comprehensive. So I would have pretty good comfort that LGNZ are across many of the issues that are certainly of interest to the local government sector
So in
anyway.
fact, you've seen the submission subsequent to this paper being prepared for us to look at. So why are we sitting around discussing it? I mean, there'll be huge overlaps here, and I take on board what Rick said before, that if there are thousands of submissions and this one's 8 pages long, they're not going to take any notice of it. We're much better off to focus on 1 or 2 significant issues for Hawke's Bay and forget the rest.
I wouldn't mind a bit of work done on 6.7, in terms of removing the ability of heritage protection authorities that are bodies corporate to give notice of a heritage protection order over private land and allow for ministerial transfer. I don't entirely understand what it really means, but what on item 12, pages I'm kind of challenged.
Page 96.
Yeah, I can read the other writing. So does that mean that, like, in our the block offer paper we discussed, we did use the heritage protected areas as a means to protect our fisheries area. We did use that in our submission. So I would hate to see our ability to utilise protection measures, because we are limited in terms of what we can do. So I would hate to see that opportunity taken away, if I read this right.
So we've gone around the traps on this. Anyone happy to perhaps move? Yes. Trust your chairman. Keep going. We do have a quorum. Someone happy to move? And Councillor Dick, do you happy to second on that? Do you wish to speak?
I think that we are expecting some more work back from the staff, obviously an analysis of the local government submission and where it aligns with that. And while I appreciate the comments that you don't want to waste staff time unnecessary, it is important that, given that this council has a particular local flavour in having the RPC, that we're seeing that we are following through the integrity of that process too, and don't see that anything cuts across that. So we do need to identify those areas where there are concern, have a foot in the door and be able to speak to it if necessary.
Seconder, other speakers? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried, thank you. Page 99, Marine Protected Areas Consultation Document.
We can be fairly quick on this one too, Mr Chairman. The government's presently consulting on a new marine protected areas regime, which would update the current 1971 Marine Reserves Act, which is well and truly past its use-by date. Successive governments have had goes at trying to review this area, and it typically comes unstuck. I'd note when this discussion document was released in January that there was a chorus of press releases from various organisations criticising it, and I don't think I saw a single press release in support of it. So this is going to have a difficult passage forward. It's incredibly complicated because it cuts across the 26 different statutes that operate in our marine space and attempts to bring it together. The interest that we have is clearly in the coastal strip and our responsibilities for management of that and how it might interact with this new regime. The discussion document's very high level and creates more questions than it provides answers in terms of how that will work in practice. The government is here trying to consult on a high level framework before getting into the detail, and for that reason we're recommending that we don't make a submission in particular. We'll just simply get in behind Local Government New Zealand that will pick up the issues, and we'll make sure that they're picking up any issues that we're seeing from a sort of an implementation point of view.
Questions? Happy to move. Seconder? Does second wish to speak further? 11th of March, yeah. Further discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Fantastic. Resource Management Planning Project Update.
It's page 103. Many of you are familiar with this. This is a regular standing item on the RPC's agendas. It just provides a brief update on the handful of key resource management policy projects that we've got on the go at the moment. Probably things that I can draw your attention to in particular are obviously that earlier today we had an in-depth discussion around the tank group and the wider tank project. We are continuing to work on this MFE funded initiative around criteria and methodology for identifying outstanding freshwater bodies. So some staff have churned out a couple of really key pieces of literature review delving into understanding what the heck was Cabinet thinking when it dreamt up some provisions around the NPS and its references to outstandingness. And yeah, they're probably just a couple of things as highlights to draw your attention to. More than happy to take any questions.
Questions? Councillor Dick.
Mr. Chairman, the oil and gas policy development, is there a time frame on completing a report to RPC in relation to a limited regional plan change arising from the Parliamentary Commissioner's report? Is there?
Yeah, we're talking
Is that July 16 as well?
before July 2016 is the milestone that's stated in the long-term plan. And if I recall correctly, there is a meeting of this committee in June. Can't recall the exact date, but so I expect something on the oil and gas stuff coming to this committee in June.
Okay, so sorry, both of those issues are July 16. Is that right?
Certainly in my mind, and perhaps James's as well, that it seems merit in a sequencing of these things. They're not totally siloed.
Yeah.
Chairman, with your indulgence, just with my recent arrival, I'm reviewing the entire work program we've got in this place. It's just in this part of the organisation's work to ensure that we've got the sequencing right in terms of, and the priorities right, and the resourcing correct as well. This is an area where the very low price of oil internationally has seen a significant reduction in the amount of activity around exploration, and I'm forming a preliminary view, subject to discussion with this committee later in the year, that we might put this slightly behind some other priorities, depending on how that resourcing picture shapes up. But I'll come back to you with some advice on that.
Councillor Belfield.
Just two questions. One is a follow-up to that. We've been shown a map which is more current that indicates the what do you call it, the parcel permit area does in fact overlap the Haratunga aquifer. And so while your global, I appreciate your global situation, there is now a fresh sort of alarm out there that, wait a minute, we were told that we thought we took a position, and we thought the government accepted a position that there would be no overlapping of permits with our aquifers. That doesn't appear to be the case. So we, at least in this process, hopefully will be clarified as to whether it is the case or isn't the case.
So I'd like to come back with some advice on that. It is true that that we now have an overlap, and that seems to be a consequence of the understanding of the extent of the aquifer and the maps associated with that having changed subsequent to our engagement with Petroleum and Minerals, who had undertaken to not allocate over the aquifer. So we've got ourselves in a little bit of a tangle. There'll be a dialogue with the permit holders. I think would be prudent to have before coming back to you, to get a sense of whether or not there is any genuine attempt to undertake any exploration and when that might happen, which will guide our thinking around how quickly we might need to move on any plan change.
Cool. My other question regards Plan Change 5, which isn't on here. My understanding on that is that the only outstanding issue was in mediation was the identification of, I think, a series of 6, whatever they were called, outstanding wetlands, I think was the thing, and that all of that has been agreed to. However, one of them cannot be mapped because the landowner involved will not permit access to the land. In a situation like that, what happens is, will it still be one of the identified outstanding wetlands? Will it drop off the table? What will happen?
All of those questions are something that parties subject to who are involved in this appeal will need to bring to the mediation table, and as you may know, mediations are sort of behind closed doors. They don't occur within the public arena. So I don't have any sort of advice I can give you at this point in time as to definitive answers to all your questions.
All the parties in the mediation agree with a list of 6. So that's not any longer at issue. It's but part of implementing them. If you don't measure it, you have no way of telling ultimately whether a landowner is in fact doing what a landowner is supposed to be doing, which is protecting the integrity of the wetland.
Right, other questions in the centre of the table? We're receiving the report. You happy to receive, Councillor Dick? I think was there. Seconder for that, receive the report. Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Wish to speak further? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no.